welcome everyone. This time around, we will be talking about the Greek debt crisis. And in previous webinars, we looked at how to do financial due diligence. We looked into how to get started, and all of those you can find on our YouTube channel. But I think this topic is really important because if you do financial due diligence, if you do look into a company, it's always very important to also delve into the economy of the country it resides in. And I think the Greek debt crisis is an excellent case of how things can also go very wrong in a country. So let's get started. The topics that we will be talking today is, well, first I want to introduce the Greek debt crisis a little bit, make you understand what actually happened. Then, with the help of the OpenBB Terminal, we are going to analyze the Greek debt crisis to show you exactly what happened, what the numbers are, and how it compares to other countries. And then we will be looking at a little bit of the current conditions of the economy and whether it is in a great shape. Perhaps, I'm not sure how much you guys are up to speed of recent financial news, but there has been some news going out about Greek companies really skyrocketing again. So that kind of gives a signal that the country is doing much better than it was during this period. So, without further ado, let's get started. The introduction. So, what is the Greek debt crisis? This is a crisis that originated around the financial crisis, where basically what happened is that a lot of the things that the Greek government reported was not valid. A lot of the numbers they reported to the European Union were just flat out wrong. And what actually happened is that they had excessive amount of debts that were very tough to recover from. And we'll be looking into that later, how much they actually had. But of course, if a country is drowned in debt, this has a big impact on how much they are actually able to spend, and whatever they, perhaps could even default. And if an economy defaults, that's actually a really big issue, because for all the people that live in that country, that kind of means that all the buildings you have and all the materials you have are, to some degree, worthless. So that's kind of what happened, and I want to look into exactly what was the case. And in this presentation we analyze this. So let's just get going. So last time we really focused on the stocks menu, and in here we will focus on the economy menu. So if I now go to the OpenBB Terminal, you will find here a section that is called Economy. So I'll type in Economy, and here you go. Here you got this entire menu. And so what does this menu really feature? Well, it has a lot to do with country performance. Here you can look into the gross domestic product, also the real gross domestic product, and all its components. And it's of course a very important metric to see how a country is performing, or also to go on the scale of the country. As you will see, is that the gross domestic product of the United States is of course a lot higher than that of Greece. But you can also look at things like the debt to GDP ratio. So it's a great metric to see how healthy a country is. If you have a very high debt to GDP ratio, it means you're quite drowned in debt, making it very hard to repay all of that. Maybe close to impossible. But also things like how are the inflation rates in the country. I think a great example of the last months was that in the European Union, you saw the inflation rate really skyrocket because of the situation with Russia and in Ukraine, whereas the United States inflation rate kind of lagged behind. Actually, I am from the Netherlands myself, and we saw inflation rates of 12 to 13%. That is incredibly high. Well, that's everything that you can see in here. You can also see the components and other metrics related to the government itself. And basically we connect to all economic databases. So we got access to the EconDB, access to threads, and that basically give you a whole lot of data. As an example, with macro, I can give you, actually I can show you that we have a table here, the parameters, a table with specific parameters that give you all kinds of data points. So let's do parameters, do a Q rate, which is the unemployment rate. And I can say, okay, I want this for, and let's say the United States, which gives you the following graph. So then you can see all the way back from 1948 until now how the unemployment rate has been moving. Well, if you are following the news, then during the corona crisis in the US, you saw very high unemployment rates. All kinds of insights you can get within this menu. Now, let's go back to the topic, the Greek debt crisis. And the first thing I want to look at here is the debt to GDP ratio. So if I can then look into this command, and let's say I want to go countries. I want to go for, let's see what they wrote here, the average value, and I want to see Greece. And basically what you see over here is that the average value for the OECD countries, so that's a large part of the European Union, is much lower than that of Greek. And this is already a big indicator that apparently Greece wasn't doing so well. This was also really the time where you saw that the Greek went into a crisis. Because if you see that the average is about 50%, 60%, and Greek is around 117, and it even skyrocketed to 236. That's only about 3 years ago. That just shows what of a crisis Greece is, and actually still is a little bit. There's a big decline, they've been performing better, but there's still a big difference. So what does it mean? It means, of course, that they can't really pay off a lot of the debt. It means that they have to cut spending, and that actually has a big impact on their overall economy and the overall performance. So it's also one of the reports states that the maximum sustainable level is around 120%, but they really went over it. So now that we know that, let's look further at what impact that then has on the gross domestic product. And of course, as you can imagine, if the debt to GDP ratio is that high, you will also see that the impact on the gross domestic product also is negative. So those are just some observations that you can already see that, okay, there was something happening here. They were not really doing so well. But there are other areas where you can look into, and that is, for example, the balance defects. So if I now look at this parameter, so that's time balance, and let's look at European Union, and I want to look at Greece. What this actually says is that Greece has been, on a consistent basis, spent more than they earn. So here they even decide to spend minus 15%. So they basically keep spending more money, which resulted in a constant increase in the amount of debt they have, in a constant deficit. Whereas if you compare it to the European Union, okay, there is some deficit, but that's fine because having a little bit of debt is okay, but it's not as significant as you can see as with Greece. So it's all kind of signals that not only they are in sort of a crisis, but also the Greek government is simply not, it doesn't have a great policy in terms of their spending. If you consistently spend more, well, even for you as a consumer, if you consistently spend more than you earn, then of course you go broke. That makes perfect sense. So there was all kinds of signals that That's until the financial crisis didn't really came to light. And yeah, that's actually already, it's quite an issue. But there are more things to look at. So we look at the balance, but we can also look at how they spend on specific areas. So here we have the spending, in which I can say, okay, let's look at countries like Greece, and let's look at Germany, France, United States, and then I want the perspective of defense. And basically what you're looking at here is a graph that shows how much of their GDP is allocated to a specific area. So this kind of shows you, what you can learn from this is that if you are constantly in a deficit, and if you are part of the European Union, it is very strange that you are actually spending a lot on a military. Of course, United States is still above it, and they are far above it in this case. But if your economy is not doing well, it would make kind of sense to cut back on spending for defense. If your entire economy is on the brink of collapsing, the last thing you should be thinking about is investing even more in military. Well, so those are kind of things that are quite interesting to see how there was really a mismanagement within the Greek government. And it's also quite interesting to see because it just signals that this is there's always a possibility of happening in different economies. It's the same what you can now see in Argentina, where they have inflation rates go basically skyrockets to, I believe, like 80 to 90%. I believe I can show you that as well. Actually, let me see if it's in our database. Yeah. This is, for example, an excellent example where you see the annual growth rate. Oh, you see it's skyrocket for Argentina. Well, that's just very interesting to keep up with these things and really see how an economy like Argentina, but also like Greece. I probably, if I do the same here for Greece, you would see also very high inflation rates. It also skyrocketed pretty high, or pretty low here, but it also skyrocketed. And that kind of also signals like, hey, this economy is not doing so well. The spending is not really in check how it should be. Well, let's continue. So those are just all the kind of things where you can really investigate how a country is performing and whatever it actually makes sense to invest in companies that are located in Greece. But I mean, you could do the same analysis for the United States, for Canada, for Japan, or for any other country where you really want to understand, okay, what is the risk that a government might collapse, or that the spending pattern is so bad that it could negatively impact the company that I invest in. And as a result, of course, of this crisis, what you see is the impact this has on unemployment. So that's actually really the sad part about this, is that if the government is not performing well, it's doing very poorly, this directly affects the civilians, the people that live in Greece. And that's also what you see when you look at the employment rates. So I tend to use like a benchmark. So for example, the European Union, and then let's incorporate Greece. And yeah, exactly what you see here is that as soon as the financial crisis hits, on average in the European Union, you saw an increase, but it was not as big as you saw in Greece, where it was almost 30% of the population was unemployed. And it went down quite significantly over the last 10 years. But even still, you can really see this does not only impact how a government operates, but it really impacts everyone. And yeah, this is a very interesting insight. It is great to see that it has been going down significantly over the years. But that's really what it does to an economy, because that's important to note. During this period, the European Union needed to basically save the Greek government by providing all kinds of severance packages, by giving them money so they wouldn't collapse. Because if they would collapse, it would have a significant impact on Europe as a whole as well. So, and lastly, we also have a metric that looks at the trust in the government. This is actually quite interesting. This data source actually does a survey on all countries, in which it asks people several questions about, hey, what do you think about the government? Do you trust in them? Do you believe that government is good for you and similar? And if you then look at Greece, you will notice that actually around, well, what is it? Very low, actually trust the government. You saw it collapse as soon as the financial crisis started, and it just kept going down as it proceeded. Then there were some improvements, and you saw a peak that quickly dropped down again. So it's actually quite painful that just 13 to 15% here actually has trust the government or believes that the government is good for them. That just doesn't really help in trying to recover the country as well. I think I can do this exercise for the United States as well. And I think in the United States also a country where not everyone really trusts the government as much. Of course, got the Republican Party and the Democratic Party that both have different view on the role of the government. And even here you see that these percentages are still much higher than it was in Greece. So yeah, all of those things just shows you, okay, this is not going so well for the country. Yeah, and then let's continue on the impact this has on the credit worthiness of Greece. And therefore, we can use the fixed income menu. This is a menu that we introduced for the OpenBB Terminal 3.0. And this menu really helps you in analyzing reference rates, central bank rates, but also government bonds, which we'll be looking at, and gives you insights in the several corporate bonds indices, so you get an understanding of, hey, how is the bond market really performing? And the thing I really want to look at here is this parameter over here, and that's about treasury rates, because I want to show you what the impact was as soon as basically the economy collapsed. So for that, I go to treasury, and I want to look at long interest rates. So that's 10 years yield on government bonds. And let's see which one to look at here. Greece, Germany, and the euro area. Greece, Germany, and euro area. And so what's very interesting to see here is you see one rate skyrockets, and that's of course Greece. If you would buy a government bond on Greece right at after the financial crisis, they promised you a yield of around 30%, and that's actually a spectacular yield. That's a lot for a bond which is supposed to be safe, but of course that wasn't the case for Greece. They desperately needed money, and that's exactly what you see here. People were not comfortable buying these bonds at like a 3% or even a lower yield. So the Greek government needed to really increase that yield before anyone even would buy them. And then still, there was a significant risk because the country was not performing well, as you saw. buying into these things could just be tremendous risk. I mean, at any time it could be that the government would still collapse, and if that happens, then you basically lose your entire investment. And as comparison, more stable ones, the efforts of the euro area, much lower, and Germany, which is exceptionally stable generally, is even lower. Well, that gives you some insights in what really changed in the bond market for Greece as well. And it's great to see that's the same what you saw with all of the graphs. It has a peak, it skyrockets, and now it has been going down tremendously. Whereas it's now really at a level where it would be a lot more interesting to invest in. All right, and I think the last thing I want to touch upon here is what happened to the ECB during this time. Because if you now use the ECB command, it gives you the interest rates that the ECB charges for its periods. And let me extend this period to a bit earlier. I'm missing a little bit piece of data. Let me use this graph over here. Basically, what you can see over here is that the hike in the ECB interest rate actually went down significantly during the financial crisis, and that was due to trying to promote spending. And because, of course, when an economy, but also Greece, is doing not so well, that's the moment for the ECB to lower the interest rates, so that for you as a person, it becomes more interesting to spend your money and not so much save it, because you get less on your bank account. Whereas if you would lend some money, it would be a lot cheaper. And of course, lowering the interest rate was not only for Greece, but a big portion of it actually was trying to make it much easier for Greece also to lend from the central bank and try to get their economy up and running. So there's also some of the metrics that you can see inside the OpenBB terminal, so you can really understand how all of these things will basically go hand to hand. So I just looked at a couple of the things that you can do here, but of course it really extends much further than that. And basically, that's kind of what I want to say here. I just wanted to really show you how you can do also economic analysis, because well, part of this is of course very important. And whenever you do any kind of research, always look at the economy as well. If the economy is not doing well, that will have an immediate impact on all countries all companies over there as well. So for example, the case of Argentina, whatever you want to invest in a company in that region, you should really need to ask yourself if that's actually a great thing to do, because there is a great chance that because the economy is really doing bad, if it even collapses, that could mean that the stock you invest in will also lose a lot of its value. And that's basically, last time we touched upon Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is, of course, a company in the United States. But then you could do the same analysis that I just did, looking at all of those metrics. How is the United States performing? There's been an increase in the debt. I believe I can show that in the United States. Perhaps this is actually debt to GDP. Yeah, even the debt to GDP ratio has gotten to levels where you could say, okay, can the United States even repay its debt? As I touched upon earlier, around 130% is sustainable. Well, the United States has been above that for quite some time as well. So those are the kind of things that are really important to look at and really factor into your investments, because this will definitely it could definitely have an impact on your investments in the near future. And I think that's all I want to say for today. A bit of a shorter session, but I think still very valuable when it comes to your research and when it comes to how to use the OpenBB terminal to also do research on countries. I then want to open it up if you have any questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. It can be unrelated to this topic. And then we can just talk about those. I'm here for you. So yeah, thanks.
And feel free to either raise your hand and we can activate your microphone if you want to chat through your question, or you can send it in through the Q&A chat box option as well. We do have a question on the OpenBB Pro. Jeroen, I don't know if you want to talk about that or if I should take that one.
Yeah, I can briefly touch upon it. That's still really in development. Still a lot of things need to be done. I'd say make sure to sign up for the waiting list. Yeah, for us, it most likely will be somewhere this year, but of course, a lot of development still needs to be done, and we still need to get a lot of feedback. So yeah, in that case, definitely sign up for the waiting list, so we will let you know when we can potentially invite you for an alpha version to get your feedback.
I've got a question here. Is there a way to get more qualitative data about a country or up-to-date news about what their central banks are doing? So news or like anything about the USA seriously thinking about defaulting on debt. I think there's sort of two parts to this, like the news and also then the data side.
I think we do have the economic calendar, so you at least have you can get some insights in what kind of things are going to be reported, and also when it comes to what the central bank is going to report and what the consensus is. So we have an actual consensus and what the previous was. Gives you some insights, at least in understanding what's on the roadmap. When it comes to actual the chances of USA defaulting on debt, that's of course very difficult. That's a very opinionated piece. Because in the end, we don't really know what happens. Perhaps they are fine for the next 50 years. Perhaps there is a serious chance. But how to quantify that chance is, of course, very difficult. So we do have insights on the calendar, economic calendar, but and the other piece is really more of an opinion. That's very difficult to give answer on. Let's see a question on how would you see the raw data that underlies the charts? Is the way to make the default view. Actually, a great thing that I forgot to touch upon is that, of course, all of this data you can completely export and you can actually view the raw data, because a lot of these commands actually have a raw tag, like here. And if I include that raw tag, I would get the actual numbers inside one of our interactive tables. So here you can view the gross domestic product of Greece over a lengthy period of time. But what you can also do is, instead of viewing it as a table, you can also export it, which we allow multiple formats. And for example, I can now export it to an XLSX file. It takes some time to load, but then within the OpenBB user data folder, you will be able to find the file. There you go. And then you can find the same data that I just showed right into this file. And of course, just like with financial due diligence, this presentation comes with a routine file. And so everything I just showed, I can run the Greek government debt crisis file. That's all in this section. Within the Getting Started webinar, I touched upon how to work with routine scripts. But basically, if I run that file, it automatically collects all of the data that I just showed you. So it is now exporting everything to one big Excel file. So if I now go back to the same folder, you find the debt crisis file right here. If you see the debt to GDP ratios, of course, it's pretty easy to also plot this information in Excel, whatever. If this is your preferred tool, then of course you can do so. But it basically gives you all the data right into an Excel file. Yeah, here you see, for example, the ECB rate that I wanted to show as well. There you go. Yeah, so everything you can put into a raw table, and everything you can also export. That's great in creating notes. Let me see. Yes, I think that's it for now. If you have any questions, please let me know.
All right. Yeah, I don't think we have any other questions. And of course, if there are more questions, feel free to either reach out to us at hello or at OpenBB. We also have a great active Discord community if you want to get involved with others and actually kind of talk through how you do your analysis or a question that you might have about the tool. But there's also a newsletter that goes out. So if you want to stay in tune with other webinars that are coming up or other company events, new releases, programs we're starting, make sure to sign up for that. And if there is nothing else, we'll conclude this webinar. And upcoming, we'll have one more on central banks as well in a couple of weeks. So in the meantime, if there are any questions again, feel free to reach out to the team. If you have feature requests, we also have that available on our website if you have an idea for our product, and we're always looking for help to improve what we have. So thank you so much for attending, everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. And thank you, Jeroen, for the great presentation.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.